Right, we're back for another episode of Creative Retrospective. And my guest for this one is Elsie, not Elise. She is I mean, we'll get into what she thinks she is in a while, but the best way I'll describe her is a YouTuber, TikToker. She covers mostly hip hop and R&B in the US space. She is a fan of some of the UK stuff. Again, we'll touch on that later. She's not based on our side. She's based on the North American side. She's based in Toronto. Also a fan of some Afrobeats as well, as she is of Nigerian descent. Where I'm going to start off with you, Elsie, again, based on, I kind of teased a little bit when I said there, you had a tweet, I think it was a couple of years ago, might have been this year, where you were like, you don't want to be described as a reviewer or a content creator or anything like that. And okay, that's where I'll start off with. Why do you reject these titles? Let's start with that.
Okay, I think that's a really good question. And yes, I remember that tweet. It was really in response to people calling me a journalist.
Right.
I feel like I hate labels. I hate labels because I feel like labels box you in. Regardless of whether people mean it in a good way or a bad way. I just feel like labels box people in. I feel like I'm a multifaceted creative. I love music, and that is the basis of what I do, but I could do it in various forms. I could be an interviewer, I could be a journalist, I could be a content creator, you know. I just love music, and I just prefer people to describe me as just someone that loves music and loves to talk about music and loves to generate conversations around music and not just one thing. Because I feel like when you're put in a box, you want to try something else. You're like, oh, why is this TikToker thinking she's a journalist?
Right.
Or
Okay. Yeah.
journalist thinking she could create content. It's like, I don't want those labels, so I could decide, because I know that what I am now is not my final form.
Right.
So I make sure I drive that home so that people know that I can be anything I want to be. I could wake up tomorrow and decide to do something different, and that's just it, you know. So that's basically.
And do you feel like that happens a lot in the content creation industry, where it's like, okay, if someone is known for making these short videos, they can't do long form content, or someone's known
it happens a lot.
Cool.
I see the audience, and it's the audience. Like, the audience sort of boxes you in. Like, I've seen a lot of people supporting. Maybe I'd have like an altercation with someone on Twitter, because Twitter is just chaotic. And someone
we'll get into that, don't worry.
And someone would be like, "Oh, she's just a TikToker. She doesn't bother anyone."
Right.
And you're defending me, but I'm like,
I guess it's like a backhanded compliment, right? Yeah.
It's backhanded in a way, because you just put me in a box like, oh, she's just a TikToker. You know, when I wanted to start doing artist interviews last year, I heard that so many times. Like, you're just a TikToker. Like, who's gonna give you an interview? You know, you're just this. Why is that? And I did that to prove a point to myself and to other people that I could wake up one morning and do something different, and it's still gonna feel organic. You know, so it's a big thing for me to kind of establish that identity now. So down the line, you're not describing me by just one title. You know?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what Kendrick said on an Absol's outro. Is like, I'm not the next social aware rapper, I'm just a human being, or something like that.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly. Yeah, because like, honestly, like, you and artists suffer. Like, people are like, oh, you're a conscious rapper, and then the day you decide not to rap about something conscious, everyone is like, what's going on? Whoa, you know. And I just don't like boxes. I'm not a fan of boxes.
Okay, that's fair. So again, for someone who's kind of like, you've got quite a bit of notoriety in the music space, I would say, but I would say for a lot of people, it's quite like, I won't say quick, like, not that it's like undeserved or anything like that, but in terms of like a lot of people that I speak to, it's like, oh, you know, it took me like 3-4 years before something. But in terms of like, as far as your content creation's gone, like, I think your first TikTok was like in 2022, where you're talking about the 3 perfect songs. I think it was like Money Trees, an ASAP song.
Wow. And like, wow, you did your research. That's
yeah, go do my interviews, right? I think the last one was like Tuscan Leather, right? So obviously being Canadian makes sense, right? So again, so before this, like, before we know you as Elsie, not Elise, and that being the tag name, what was Elsie doing? Yeah,
that's a really good question. So all my life, I've always known I want to do something creative. I've always loved music. If you go back and you ask people that I went to high school with, like, it was my thing. Music has always been my thing. But I never knew what I wanted to do with it. I went to university. I studied computer science. I graduated, got my degree, started working. in tech. So I've just followed like the path, but I never had any passion for computer science. I just did it because like go to university, okay, it's the next step after like high school, you know. So I did that and like it worked out, but I just never felt that satisfaction. And every time I would come online and I would see discourse around music, I've been tweeting about music for a long time now. Like if you go and look at my account, it's been almost 10 years. I've actually always just been tweeting my thoughts randomly about music. But I started noticing a shift online of like content creators coming on. That's around, let's say 2020 in the pandemic. And I initially tried my hand at a podcast. I ran a podcast for about a year. It wasn't a music-centric podcast. It was called Can We Talk? And I just have guests and we just talk about random things. Like sometimes we'll talk about music. I remember an episode where the topic was, can we separate the art from the artist? We talk about like real life stuff. But every time I would never really feel super passionate, except if we're talking about music. And I would see people online like make videos. I'll go on TikTok. I was using TikTok just as a consumer. And I would scroll on TikTok and I'd see people talk about music. And I'd always be, and maybe call it an ego thing. I'd always be like, I could do this better all the time. Like I would see these videos get like hundreds of thousands of views, low production quality, not like the person is really adding anything, bringing anything to the table. And I'll be like, these people are getting successful at this. I studied computer science. I'm very good at editing. It's something that I already know how to do. I feel like I could articulate my thoughts well. So like, why can I, like, so I played around with the thought a bit. I was like, maybe, you know, how am I going to start and everything? And just a random day, I think it was March of 2022. I was like, okay, whatever. I went on Amazon. I bought a tripod. I bought a mic. And I was just like, let me just try. Let me just try. Like, even if I fail, like, who cares? Because it was TikTok, you know, it was a new social media for me. I had 0 followers. So it's not like, oh, I was already starting out with an audience that already knew me. And I think that helped because no one knew who I was, basically. And then I started making content and then it started catching on. And I'd realize that I have a very unique experience when I listen to music. And I know that if I resonate with something, I know at least one other person is going to resonate with it. So I'd look for just this little key things I hear in music that I don't feel like everyone talks about, and I'll talk about it. And first 3 months, I got 50K. That's the first thing I've ever really done in my life that I had seen results that quickly.
That's crazy.
And I think it was like a huge, it didn't make sense to me because I was working at the time. And it was like, okay, you know, okay, fine, this is cool. And then 5 months in, Amazon Music reaches out to me. And I'm like, people actually see my content. This is crazy. And I really just started like, I was like, okay, let's ramp this up. Like, let's see where we could take this. Cause like, I started getting offers to like, help artists promote music. People can make money on this. Like I didn't start content creation to make money. I had a traditional job. So I was like, oh, just do this on the side. I started to actually generate income from this. I'm like, okay, like I always want to talk about music, but I did not ever think of it as a career path because I don't want to be an artist. I'm not built for being an artist. I don't crave that life whatsoever. So once I started seeing that there was a possibility for me to actually turn this into a career, I took it super seriously because I wasn't really happy at my job.
Yeah.
And it started catching on. Like, honestly, I know that it's not just me. I know that God, like, there's some sort of supernatural. It's not me. I keep saying it because, like, I really can't give people a formula. I don't think I did anything super special. I don't think I had like a formula from the start. It just, I've been lucky in many ways, and I accept that. I think it was last year. I've seen so much success on TikTok, and then people started to be like, TikToker. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, going back to the
we're gonna transition. Like, let's start up YouTube. Let's ramp up activity on Twitter, you know, let people discover me from other social
Right.
media and not just one thing. And I feel like I'm still in the process of making that happen, but I've seen fairly like good results so far, and it's all a learning process, really.
Oh, of course. And I think there's a few things I want to kind of touch on there. I think you kind of saying like, well, I just did computer science just because I feel like that's the most Nigerian thing ever, right? It's like, oh, well, go to uni, right? But you know, shit, what's the thing that is most funny? Oh, is it like tech? Okay, fuck it, let's do it, right? And
Yeah,
I think a lot of
exactly.
people can relate to that. But it's funny you say stuff about like not wanting to be a musician and stuff like that. 'Cause I think you said before that you've been learning the piano since you were 8 and you learned guitar more recently, right? So it's like, okay, was there a
Teaching
world where
myself guitar
yeah,
finally.
yeah, but I think you always go, okay, is there a world that people want to be a musician? But then you said, okay, no, outright don't want to do any of that, right? And in
No.
terms of the discussion about music, I think the ego thing I can fully relate because again, during the pandemic, everyone's kind of thinking about their life, like, what am I gonna do? What am I doing? All
Yeah.
that stuff. Right. And I remember, like, again, I feel like I'm quite cocky, right? So me and my friend John, before we started the Vinyl Collective, we were just kind of like, well, a lot of people talk a lot of shit. Like, we could just do this. It was literally just like
Right.
that. I think Lianla Havas's album just dropped, and we're like, fuck it, let's just do this. And then it literally was that for the
Exactly.
next couple of years. So I think sometimes it's the best way to kind of get you to do something is just being like, oh, I actually think I could do this better.
I
And
also
then,
think
like,
I could do it. You know,
yeah.
I feel like we are like, honestly, we are our biggest obstacles.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of people want to try things and it does, like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's what I tell myself. So even if you miss, I tried. You know, and it
Of
is what
course.
it is, really.
Of course, and you said like you saw a lot of quick success, right? So I think that like the following year, it was I think Spotify reached out to do kind of like the genre spotlights and stuff like that. How did that
Yeah,
opportunity?
that was last year. Honestly, when I got that email, it was like, whoa, because I've always wanted to work with Spotify. It, you know, it was very surprising getting that. It was very validating, but along this journey, I've realized that like some of my biggest dreams weren't really what I wanted.
Is
You
it kind
know?
of like a don't meet your heroes type of thing, if I was to say like
Yes,
that?
yes,
Right. Okay.
yeah. It was like that for Spotify. It was like, oh, Spotify, and then the actual work started. I'm like, oh,
Spotify.
okay. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, but it's still cool, you know, it's still something cool to say. I still, even though it didn't work out as I originally envisioned, I still feel like, you know, for the fact that someone on your team saw my content and wanted it on your page, I just feel like it's a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. So let's move on now to kind of now you're in kind of like the world of making content, talking about music.
Mm-hmm.
You said something that kind of intrigued me a little bit, where you said that allowing your audience to dictate your content is like a slippery slope, right? But at the same
It
time,
is.
you gotta like appease your audience. These people kind of invest in you, they're giving you their time, their eyeball, stuff like that. But I think audiences, especially now more than ever, they want to have some sort of personalization. They want to feel connected to the
Access.
yeah, it's like access. They want to feel like there's a person behind what they're covering, right? So it's like they don't want to just
Yeah.
feel like I mean, with certain artists, right, who are like they're just here for the music and they disappear. Like even if the music is great, they don't feel as connected to that artist. I think the same can be made for content creators, right? So how do you balance that? Like how do you resolve that as a creator yourself?
I remember talking to a friend when I first started my TikTok account and being like, okay, maybe when the first few videos did well, I'm like, okay, maybe I should ask the audience, like, what do they want to see from me? And they're like, that's the biggest mistake you're ever gonna make. Because if you start allowing an audience dictate your content, dictate what you are, you find yourself in a box, which I hate boxes. Like, and I feel nowadays people develop how do I put this?
But parasocial relationships?
Parasocial relationships with people online. And that is why I feel like I've successfully separated my real life from my social like media. Like, Elsie, the content creator. You're never, ever, ever gonna see me come on Twitter and start telling you about my personal life and how this happened and that happened, because it's just the boundary I've decided to set really early. Because like I've really realized when I look at I feel like when you enter this industry, the best thing you can do is learn from the mistakes that other people have made. And I figured out that a lot of like content creators, their downfall has been letting people in too much. And the thing is that once you put something out on the internet, you've if you can be like, oh, it's my business. No, the moment you bring something online, it's everyone's business. Like you cannot control the conversation regarding everything. So I try to be very transparent about my music taste and everything. We could talk about music for hours, but I've made a conscious decision that I don't think I'm ever going to change to like keep my personal life very separate from that. Because like the moment you open it to people, you're going to find like you're going to think they have like authority to kind of speak on things that they don't know and aspects of my life that they don't know. And it's something that I've decided to do. So I try to keep a distance, to be honest, like even from people that reach out to me and tell me, I love what you do. It's like, cool, thank you. I would never be like not polite about it and be like, oh, whatever. Like I always like, I appreciate everyone that engages with my content in any way, because when you think about it, people are not obliged to engage with your content. Like
sure.
Whether you make the best content in the world, like people aren't obliged to actually click on your video and watch your video or listen to your podcast. Or so whenever anyone takes the time and leaves like a kind comment or say, I appreciate it deeply. I do not take that for granted. But also you just have to remember that like it's me doing this, and it's my life and it's my career, and I can decide to take it in whatever direction I want to take it in. And honestly, if you're here for the ride, thank you. If you're not here for the ride, that's your business. Like that's really just been my mentality. Really, I know that this career is gonna, with a lot of visibility comes a lot of critique and a lot of hate. And I've had to develop thick skin. It's not been easy. There have been moments where, I'm not gonna lie, I'm human. Has gotten to me sometimes. But the more I've learned, the easier it's just been to just block out the noise and just do what I'm good at. At the end of the day, it's my career. I'm getting paid. I'm achieving my goals, and you're behind your keyboard typing. So I'm like,
yeah. I mean that's fair, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely fair, because I think what sometimes, again, I thought exactly the same, right? In terms of, I kind of kept that philosophy kind of all the way. Like I think sometimes when people see other people kind of seeing when people are making content, right, the things that go viral, even if it is just a music podcast, you might get those things where like you watch Joe Budden and they're talking about something that's unrelated, and people feel like I need to do that as well because this is the thing that's going to get the clicks. But sometimes I feel like people don't put full faith behind themselves and their talent to actually talk about the content that they're here to talk about. They feel like they need to kind of like scandalize it so people
can watch. No way.
And I feel like sometimes that's a bridge. I think some people, I'll say, in my opinion, it's maybe like a bit of an impatience thing, because like I want the views, I want the generation.
I want the views so bad.
So like, even though we're talking about Frank Ocean, let me talk about like, I don't know, the worst state I've ever been on. It's like, oh, you could do that and it might work, right?
And but
then that's there for the rest of your life, right? So I think it's a hard. Obviously, some people are happy and some people are very open, and some people wear their hearts on their sleeves and they can do that. But I think, right, yeah.
But I just feel like you start with how you want to consume, and I feel like when you start with gimmicks, the truth of the matter is that when you latch onto trends, when you latch onto gimmicks, every trend, every gimmick has its cycle. And if you latch on to that, you actually, then that's where the issue of longevity comes in. Because like when the trend and the cycle and the gimmick is over, so is your career.
Yeah.
Like, and that's one thing I've just realized from the beginning. And I'm like, I'm going to do this without gimmicks. I made a promise from the first day I started. I'm like, I'm going to do this without gimmicks. I'm not going to just do whatever it is for just being trendy sake. Whenever I turn on the camera, I know what I'm turning on the camera to talk about. Whenever I open Twitter, I know what I'm opening Twitter to talk about. I'm not just like for the sake of it, because like it's a very slippery slope.
Yeah, of course. But let's get into the music, right? I think one of the things you do talk about a lot on social media is kind of like content, but not content, it's how music is kind of received by the audience in terms of how music gets popular and stuff like that. And you said before, social media is the new A&R, or sometimes Spotify playlists are the new A&R, but word of mouth is king, right? So you've made playlists before, you still make playlists, right? So as someone who does make playlists, like how do you, I guess, what do you think of this approach? Do you think it's like, I know some people are like, oh, it's not like the good old days and stuff like that, but some people are like, oh, it's just different. How does Elsie think about this?
About like making playlists.
I guess how playlists are the new A&R, and you know, word of mouth is king. But like, okay, in this new world, is this a better or worse approach, or is it just something we have to adapt to?
Okay, that's a good question. I think there's two sides to it, really. Before, like, listening, I grew up in a time. I'm not old. People think I'm old. No, I'm in my early 20s. But growing up, social media was not music discovery. I discovered music through MTV, listening to the radio. Like, that's how I heard music. And a lot of like my childhood memories around music is that. But nowadays, you know, curation is a whole brand new thing. I love the fact that music is so easily accessible, and I love playlists. I love the whole music discovery thing, but I've realized that it's made people lazy also in another aspect. You know, it's made the way we consume music. So I made a video last year, and I'm like, people kind of consume music like fast food anymore. Like, you see someone like, I love music, but I'm never gonna sit down and listen to an entire album. And I'm like, what? Like, what are we talking about here? You know, and like and some people are like, you're not going to listen to songs over 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I just feel like with social media, attention spans are dying, and so is the music, and so is the quality of the art as well. And that's why I feel like people like me and people on social media that are passionate about music, I literally feel like we have a responsibility. Like, people might say it's not this deep, but I literally feel like we have a responsibility to kind of just remind people that like music is powerful. Like, for a lot of people, it's just like, it's just music. But for a lot of people, it's not just music. Like, I love music so much because of the role it has played in my life, the role it has played in very difficult moments of my life, the role it has played in great moments of my life, the fact that it has been a fixture that could heal, that could encourage, you know, that could keep you company, even in I've spent a lot of my time alone. I moved to Canada as a teenager by myself. I did not have family with me. So like, music has always been occupied a huge part of my life. So I always here to remind people that it's more than just a cool song you can dance to on TikTok. It's more than just a trend. It's more than just something you play in the function. You know, a lot of people say it, or it's more than something you play on the aux so that the girls come. It's much more than that. And I want people to see that. And that's why I've made it like I've made it an objective to call out trash when I see trash. I've made it an objective to say this is not what it should be. If we want to keep the quality of music, and we want to keep what is sacred to a lot of people still sacred, and we keep people interested and having intention about music, then people like me are needed to keep having these conversations. If not, like, listeners are lazy, artists are lazy. Like, what is going on, you know?
For sure. And I think this is something that I don't know how I feel about it. Firstly, in terms of music, I feel almost, again, very strongly to how you feel, where it's so interesting how people are so quick to dismiss music as like the first line of like defense. So for example, what I mean by that is, let's say when it comes to music kind of being served as like something that people can enjoy in the function and stuff like that, people are happy for it. But the moment when it's almost as if when people want to either like get their life together or stuff like that, it's like music's the first thing to be critiqued. It's like, oh, that music's not good for you and stuff like that. It's like, wait, no, this music literally carried me through so many different parts of my life, right?
Exactly.
And I think, or when, like, for example, in the UK, right, drill is one of the, like, was at a time was one of our main genres, right? And a lot of times when like crime was happening, that it would be the first thing. Like, I think when we were younger, it was video games, right? It was like GTA. It was GTA again. I mean, it's like everyone who plays games knows that's not fucking true, right? That's got nothing to do with it. But then it's now switched on to music. It's like, oh, see, they've listened to all that, you know, AM and Skendo. That's why he didn't get. It's like, come on, man. Like, come on. Like, you're just picking out one song, right? It's just, but it's kind of scary how many people do kind of align with those thoughts. It's like, no, I think some people, obviously people like yourself, don't see it like that, but a lot of people do kind of see music as this thing of, well, it's here. If it wasn't here, then it's not here, right? And it's like, well, if it wasn't here, my life would be very different, right?
Very different, you know, and that's the reason why I do what I do, because I just want people to know that music is deep. It might not be deep to a lot of people, and I think because social media has kind of like lumped all of us together. There's this meme I always see on Twitter. It is like, you know how they'd always like, if you go to high schools, they'd have like an honors class and like another like, oh, this people that are struggling, they're in their own category. I feel like social media just lumps all of us together in like one huge room. And like the people that don't really resonate are trying to argue and tell you that, oh, it's not that deep. Like if I can't play this music in the club, is trash. And you're like, a lot of the music I have consumed in my entire life has been in solitude. Me, myself, my headphones, you know? So I want to be there to be that voice of reason, to be like, you might not see music as deep. You might not see music as sacred in any way to be protected, but I see it as that because I know the role it has played for me and I know the role that it could play for other people, you know? So yeah.
And I'm gonna tie this into your content creation, right? Because I do feel like sometimes people need to be broke. Like I think you've mentioned this before when it comes to explaining things to people. As you create content, you have to kind of break things down in very simple terms. So sometimes when I might read it, I think this is maybe my own ego speaking. I'll be like, wait, doesn't everyone know this? And I'm actually, no, she's talking to the everyday person, right?
I realize that.
And I think the problem with that, again, kind of in line to something else you also said when you said like people just regurgitate what content creators say, right? So there's a dangerous kind of thing, right? Whereas people might just regurgitate what you're saying, right? So how do you like resolve this, or is it anything you've ever considered when you create content?
I have considered it because yes, a lot of times I see opinions on social media and I'm like, that is not your opinion. I know that you watched an Anthony Fantano video, and that is where regurgitating your thoughts from. And social media is there's a weird space we're in right now where groupthink is the new norm. People don't even know their opinions until someone says it, and you're like, oh yeah, this is how I feel, and they regurgitate it. So whenever I'm talking about music, I always try to bring in a personal aspect. And whenever people like, a lot of times people are like, I hate this. Should I listen to this? I love this, Elsie, especially on Twitter where it's much more interactive. I always say my thoughts about music, but I always make sure to disclaim that these are my thoughts, except in the case where I'm educating. Like sometimes you're just educating, like telling people the history behind the song or something. But when I'm giving personal opinions, I make sure to disclaim that these are my thoughts. Whenever people are like, should I listen to this? I'm like, listen to it and form your own thoughts.
That's a crazy question.
Don't ask me whether you should listen to this or not. Like, because the truth of the matter is I love music. I'm passionate about music, but my opinion is not gospel. There are other people that are passionate about music and feel very differently. And I respect that completely. So I'm very big on listen, form your own thoughts. But what I'm going to say is that listen with your own mind, form your own thoughts. And if you have your own thoughts, you're able to defend that. You're able to have coherent conversations, not just this is mid, this is trash, you know, like, okay, tell us why the song is trash. This is the greatest thing ever. Why? Tell us why the song is the greatest thing ever. And you find out a lot of times they don't have more vocabulary than mid or trash. They're not able to tell you more. And that is just because of groupthink. So that's why whenever I tell people I love this album, I'm not just saying this is the best album ever. I'm going to give you my reasons. I love the instrumentation. I love the production. I love this and that. That's the type of music conversations we should be having. Not just, this is mid, this is trash.
I think even worse, I'll add to that, is when people say, oh, you're wrong. But it's like, okay, why am I wrong? Or why do you feel like wrong? Yeah, right? Exactly. I've got a lot of people do that as well.
Explain. Like, I figured there's so many people on the internet that cannot explain. Like, they're just like, oh, it's trash. Okay, tell us why you think it's trash. If you think it's trash, it's not an invalid opinion, but be able to have coherency to back it up. Why do you think something is trash? Why do you think something can be better? Not just regurgitating. That's the easiest way to check if someone is just regurgitating, because they can't actually explain the reasoning behind your thoughts, you know. So
for sure. Yeah. I'll say one of the things that makes you most unique as like a person in the music space, or something, or from what I say, what makes you the most popular is your focus on rollouts, right? And I have my own opinion about rollouts, right? Because I'm like, okay, if I like an artist, I'm going to listen regardless of whether the rollout's good or not, right?
True.
Yeah, you know what I mean, that's how I feel. But for you, it seems like something you're quite passionate about. So talk to us. Why are like album rollouts so important to you?
They're so important because, like you said, some artists I believe in them regardless. Even if they just tell me I'm dropping an album tomorrow night, I'm gonna tune in because I listen to them. I have confidence in the art.
Right.
But people realize that, for example, I want to use ScHoolboy Q as an example.
Oh, go ahead.
ScHoolboy Q was big when I was in high school. So people around my age, I'd say people from their mid-20s upwards, were very familiar, especially when he was like super big in the media.
Yep.
But someone that's 18 right now hasn't really lived through a world where they heard ScHoolboy Q on the radio. They saw ScHoolboy Q playing. Bruh, every time I'll turn on MTV, Collard Greens would play for an hour. Like they would rerun that video like so many times. And I used to be on MTV. I used to obsess over it. So that's how I learned so many lyrics. Collard Greens, Man of the Year, like. But people nowadays don't have that. And it's only if except you go like TikTok famous. So that's where a good rollout comes in, because you get to bring other people along, people that your fan base is going to check for you either way, even if you disappear for 10 years. But a rollout is always an opportunity to get people talking and to bring a new, because there are new music listeners popping up every day. I ran a space a couple weeks ago, and someone told me that the first Kendrick album he listened to was Mr. Morale. I was like, whoa. Okay. And that actually put things in perspective. Like what you might think is normalized, like who didn't listen to Pimp a Butterfly, like who didn't hear Good Kid Mad City, but someone's first Kendrick album was Mr. Morale. And I think we need to keep that in mind as artists and as music like listeners, that what might be the norm to you is probably not the norm to someone else. And a good rollout helps like get people interested. It helps get people talking. I see a lot of people like Blue Lips, and I feel like it would not have had the impact it had if that rollout wasn't what it was.
That's fair. So that's fair. And then you know what's funny, you say that, because for the longest time, when I used to go to concerts, right, I've been to a lot of concerts in my life. And again, in my head, I'm just sitting here, I'm thinking everyone who's bought a ticket to this concert knows who the fuck they're seeing, right? Of course. And you know, at the end of a concert, they'll be like, oh, no, my name is like Kendrick Lamar, thank you. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we know who we're seeing, right? But then I get it, because there are some people, you know, some special people in this world, right? They'll literally just go because their friends going, or they'll go because they heard of something. Right? It's crazy.
I remember like being at a festival last year, and I was like really camping in front of the stage because Kendrick was opening, and I was like, it was my first time seeing Kendrick. I've been a Kendrick fan since forever. And the people beside me, like, I went by myself and I was trying to make conversation with the people around me. And I'm like, oh, you're here to see Kendrick. Yes. Okay. What's your favorite Kendrick song? And a lot of them were like, America Has a Problem remix with Beyonce. Like I was dumbfounded. I'm like, what? Like, bruh, like, so I realized that the people were here maybe because of like, they saw like a viral Kendrick song. They actually don't even know much. Like they don't really, when you mentioned, like I was the only one in my section when he performed Money Trees that was knew the lyrics. Everyone else is like nodding their heads. I'm like, okay, so this is like, so you know, social media is not reality. Social media will make you think that everyone knows everything you know, but in reality, no. People don't know, you know.
So I want to kind of move on to your interviews, right? So again, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like your interviews, you try to go for more intimate style where you're trying to like connect with the person. Like, even though you are there to talk about their music or their album and stuff like that, it seems like you do make an attempt to kind of connect to them on a human level or get them to express themselves on a human level. And you seem quite focused on like the thought process they had when making things, like the kind of mechanical nuts and bolts. Does that come from you? No, like maybe it could be a computer scientist or maybe kind of play music yourself. Do you think that there's the connection there?
I think there's a connection. Whenever I listen to music, I would always be like, because I don't know, I don't feel like I listen to music like the average person. Like I sit down and I'm like, why did he use that sample? Like why? Like why did he decide to say this instead of say that? Like, and every time there's some albums and songs I wish I was a fly in the studio when it was being recorded. So sometimes I want to get into like the artist's psyche. Like, did you know this song was going to be this big when you were making it? Or like when you picked this person as a feature, like did you start out the song knowing that you wanted this person on there as a feature? I just feel like as like a super fan, I feel like there are people that also think like me that want to know those little details. And
for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm successful in picking the artist's brain. Sometimes I'm not successful.
It's
like,
hard. It's a tightrope sometimes.
It's a learning process, because also like when I go into interviews, it's a whole different ball game, because it's like, first of all, you're thinking, like when I was preparing for the ScHoolboy Q interview, that has been like the craziest process of my entire life.
Yeah,
because
you talked about that on Sound Centric, but you don't want to be caught off guard at all or something like that.
I don't, but also it wasn't even a matter of being caught off guard, because I believed in my ability to prepare.
Right.
But also like, what if I get there that day, I'm prepared, and he's just like, who the fuck? Like he's just like, I don't like this girl. Like,
yeah,
I don't even want to talk to her, because like in real life, you could gauge energy. Like you could tell when someone is just tolerating you. And like, that is always a fear when I go into interviews, because I'm like, is he having a bad day? Is she having a bad day? Like, am I just like disrupting them? So it's always, sometimes it's like, I'm a girl. I'm a girl in her 20s. He's a guy in his late 30s. Like, what do we even have in common? You know, it's just those little things. And just like, I think that's what's most nerve-wracking about interviews. Just like, do they like the questions? Because I have an interview with Denzel Curry that's coming out, but he caught me off guard a lot of times. Like, I asked a couple questions, and because I interviewed him at a festival, I think 4 other people interviewed him that day. And so I asked a question, and he's like, yeah, someone's asked me that already. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, like, it
does happen, right? Like I remember because one thing you said is like you won't want to kind of like, because you said you put a lot of research into your interviews, so you don't want to kind of ask them something that, because especially when someone's going through the cycle of like interviews when they're dropping music, right? You don't want to ask them something they've been asked 7 times before. But sometimes it does happen, right? Like even to the best of us, it does happen. Yeah.
And the thing is that apart from just giving a good interview, of course, I want to make a good impression. Like I want the artist to meet me and remember me. And I feel like it's been really successful with ScHoolboy Q. Like I feel like after the whole thing, like I had a very good impression. Even Jordan Ward, like we've become friends because of like meeting that. So I don't want the interviews just to be transactional. Like give me my interview, bye. Like I always want a good impression, because I know that, who knows, this artist might drop another project in 3 years and I might be back, you know, to talk again to them. So I always want to leave that door open. And I feel like that's really the most challenging thing, because you just have to hope that all the stars fall in place. I've had a couple interviews where I just knew that the artist wasn't in a good mood.
Let's start that. I want to start with your first kind of major interview, right? Because I think one of the things you said was like you didn't have any sort of big backing to get interviews. You kind of just got out the mud, so to speak. And your first one was Amaarae, right? So that was like the big one. And it's funny you mentioned about energy and stuff like that, because when I was watching this interview, one thing I always pick up on is the accents people use when they're like in interviews, right? Because obviously she's Ghanaian, you're Nigerian, but everyone's talking very prim and proper, everyone's being very professional. And then there's like a moment where you guys realize, oh, like we fuck each other, we can understand each other, and then kind of starts falling by the wayside. I think it was really cute. So like,
that's crazy that you noticed that. That's crazy that you noticed that, actually. And I feel like you could always feel like a shift in energy. My first interviewing
Let's talk about it. Yeah, go on.
Interviewing Amaarae, like middle of last year, let's say May of last year, I was like, I want to start doing artist interviews. I reached out to I'm not joking, 50 teams. Like I emailed, not one reply. I had sent emails for months, and the ones that I got replies for, to be like, can you show us the other interviews that you've done? Like I haven't done any interviews, like, and no one is willing to give me a chance. So it's like the job market. Everyone's looking for 4 years of experience, but you don't even want to give anyone an entry-level job. So how is anyone even gonna get the 4 years of experience if they can't get a job? So I was starting to feel really frustrated, because I'm just like, no one is even giving me a chance to do an interview. Everyone is asking me if I've done any previous interviews. How the hell is this going to happen? And mind you, the artists that I was reaching out to, I wasn't reaching out to Beyonce and Jay-Z. I was reaching out to like underground. There are a lot of artists, I wouldn't mention names, You're like, we don't really think you're relevant enough. Okay, no problem.
Jeez, okay.
Back then, you know what? It's fine. Like, I took that as a battery in my back. I'm like, okay, let's just give it time. But September happened, and I have this content creator. He's my friend. He's a fellow big content creator, Black content creator. His page is Gen Direct Music, and he creates content around R&B. He has very huge R&B platforms: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And he reaches out to me because I see that he started doing artist interviews. So I asked him occasionally. I told him about like my dream of doing interviews, and I just told him like if he had any pointers for me and everything. And then on a random day in September last year, he just emails me. He's like, Universal Music contacted me to do an interview with Amaarae. I don't really do, he says, I don't really do Afro beats. I'm not extremely familiar with Amaarae.
Okay.
I told them to ask you to do it instead. I was dumbfounded. Like, honestly, whenever I think about what he did for me, like, it's still mind-blowing, because for someone else to have an opportunity given to them and be like, I don't even think I'm the best, but I would recommend someone for you, someone that has no experience. And off the strength of his recommendation, Universal contacted me. They were like, we have this interview in like 4 days. Can you be at our Universal office in Toronto at this time? And I was like, yes. Like, I didn't even care. I didn't even have time to prepare, but it was like, I am not missing this opportunity. Even in Toronto at the time where I got that, I flew back. Like, I flew back. Like,
wait, where was you? If you mind me asking, like, how far were you?
I wasn't too far. Like, I was still in Canada.
Okay.
But like, I wasn't in Toronto. So I was like, I'm not missing this for anything. Like, I flew there, and I was there that day. And like, I was so scared, like, meeting her, because, you know, there's always this fear of like meeting your idols, meeting people that you like. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know what to expect. And I go into the room, and it's very different when you're doing interviews that are independent and when you're doing interviews that are label backed, because you enter a room and it's like 10 people like just watching you, like, while the interview is going on. So in the interview, you just see me and Amaarae, there were like 10 people in the room. And like, it was, but I would remember talking to a friend before then and being like, will she like me? Like, will she care? And he's like, when the artist sees that you've done research, when the artist sees that you actually care about the music, they will like you. So I went through that, and like, Amaarae was extremely kind, extremely nice, extremely pleasant. And just that interview, like, it just opened the door. Before you know it, like, Jordan Ward came through, Khamaari came through, and I was just able to like learn about these artists. And just, it's been a fun experience, you know, it's been a fun experience. And a lot of things, like, it's been trial and error. Like, first interview, I'm like, okay, one camera angle, no, another camera angle, no, the sound has to be good. So I'm learning with every interview. I'm like, it has to be better than the last. It has to be better than the last. It's still very challenging doing interviews as just myself. When I was interviewing Denzel Curry, he's like, my name is Denzel Curry, and I'm here with Elsie from, and I'm like, just Elsie. I'm not with any company. He's like, what company are you with? Because everyone will be like, oh, I'm with Pitchfork, I'm with NPR, I'm with MTV. And I'm like, no, I'm by myself. Like, it's just me. So it's been really hard navigating that, because the more I'm in the industry, I realize that it's very rare. It's very rare to have come as far as I've come in the way that I've done it. So I don't take it for granted, because a lot of people, like, believe it or not, have like major industry backing. And I don't have industry backing. So it's just a matter of like reaching out, forming connections. I got the Denzel Curry interview because I got the Raven Lene interview, and I did it well. And I made friends with her manager, and he put a word for me to get that. So every interview you do, I try to do it really well and make sure I form those connections, because this industry, you have to network your ass off. Like, that is just the truth. Like,
with that being said, right, like, again, for someone starting out, like, someone might be watching this thinking, oh, I want to be like Elsie one day. Like, for someone who didn't have the backing, what would be your advice to kind of, okay, I want to start interviewing artists, I think I'm good enough, where should I start? What should I do? What mentality should I have going into it?
Firstly, you have to have something. One thing I would say is that you have to have something of your own. You cannot wake up today and be like, I'm going to interview artists. You have to have something that already shows your creativity in some way, that shows your affiliation in some way, be it making content online. A lot of the when I was able to get Khamaari and Jordan Ward, the main reason I was able to get those interviews, apart from like, it was because I'd spoken about those artists before. Like I had TikTok videos talking about them. I talked about them on my Twitter. So I literally would copy all the links to all the videos and be like, I love him. I'm familiar with his music. I've spread the word, you know, so that's a big step in doing that. Secondly, like, don't be afraid, even if you think you're not qualified. Like, even like imposter syndrome is gonna kick your ass, is the truth. But just have that belief in your ability when you're reaching out to people, because people are going to devalue you in this industry, whether or not you're the best thing. Like, people are going to tell you you're not good enough, even though you know you're good enough. Like, and you just have to have that belief to just keep going. It's not going to fall into nothing. For this interviews, it taught me that nothing happens overnight. I chased Jordan Ward for 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months, like, before I got that interview. It was like, I kept pushing. So just don't expect anything to happen overnight. Like, that's just, is not realistic. And so, yeah, the main thing I would say is, if you want to interview an artist, you have to generate conversation about the artist some way, somehow. Yeah. Whether it's through your social media, through a podcast, you have to put it out there in the universe. You can't just come out of nowhere and be like, yeah, I just want to be an interviewer. Like, it's not just gonna work that way.
And it makes sense for the artist, right? Like, because they don't want to get fucked over, right? And meet this person who's like, it reminds me of this video of like Vince Staples bringing this white boy up on stage, right, to sing Big Fish. I think it was recently. And obviously he comes on stage, guy doesn't know a single word, right? And obviously it's a bit funny, but it's kind of like, well, you had the opportunity to kind of be on stage, maybe even have a moment, right? But then it's just like, oh, I'm just trying to come on, I don't know any songs, I'm just here, right? And I think it's the same with artists. They don't want to kind of go into an interview and they're dedicating time that they could be doing something else, maybe even generating money, right? And you're like, just there like, so like, what did you feel about your album? Like, no, like, come on, you gotta come with a bit more than that, right? Especially if it's out of your life. Exactly. So yeah, it makes sense. I think anyone who has reached out for interviews, anyone, like, you do definitely get a bit salty, right? You're like, oh man, like, I didn't get a reply, or someone's like, oh, I need to check with my manager and stuff like that. But it makes sense.
Even for me, when people reach out and you're like, Elsie, I want you to come on my podcast or something, I'm very selective, because sometimes people have no clue. Like, they're like, oh, I've seen, and sometimes people email me and I'm like, are you sure it's the same Elsie? Like, they just say or they call me Elise. That's really the craziest one. Like, hey, Elise. I'm like, you got it wrong from the start. Like, at this point, I don't even want to read. Yeah. Like, you've lost from the start, you know? So I feel like when the artist sees that you actually have a genuine interest, like, I remember Amaarae telling me during the interview, like, oh, you really listened to the album. I was like, it was validating. I'm like, yes, I listened. Like, I did my research, you know? And I feel like it's always a good feeling, because I was talking to Devin Malik a few weeks ago, and he was telling me that he's been in some interviews where people wouldn't even pronounce his name correctly. They just be like Devin Malik or stuff like that. And like, I get how that could be just aggravating. Like, how you interview me, you don't even know how to pronounce my name.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so yeah,
it's crazy. And again, I think a lot of people watching, I think maybe the first major interview is probably the hardest to get, but it does create a positive feedback loop where people kind of watch interview, they start championing you. And I think that's exactly what happened with yourself, right, Elsie? Like, in terms of like, people appreciate your work so much in terms of, again, going back to the rollouts. And again, we're going to get to Quincy right now, in terms of, he sees your tweet, right? And he's like, oh, right, people still appreciate music. It's great. And you get that lookout in. Yeah. But then I think it was Rap Talk Hub that kind of reached out and said, oh, look, ScHoolboy Q, if you can, like, do this interview with her. And he even said, like I said, for the time, and he's like, oh yeah, a month later, she's still doing this. Let's go. Let's do this. I was like, wow, it's so funny how some people keep track of that day still doesn't seem real, to be honest. Because like,
honestly, the person that, and God bless, I had to DM them and be like, whoa, because like, I saw that tweet and I was in the gym that morning. I just saw the tweet and I was like, this is so nice of him, but this is never happening. Like, and that was really my reply. I'm like, thank you so much for, like, you know, pitching me, but like, let's just come back to reality here. That's not happening. Like, and then when he quotes it, I'm like, what? But, you know, also one thing that people don't realize is that, okay, for even if an artist tweets at you, doesn't mean anything's gonna happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
for sure, yeah.
Like, that's the truth. Like, doesn't mean anything's gonna happen. So even when he was like, yeah, let's oh, she's been going at it, Frey. I was like, okay, this is cool. He's seen my tweet, but I don't know. And then I see a DM from him.
Crazy.
And that's when it's like, okay. But even at that step, I was still not sure.
Right.
Because in this industry, artists, I've had a few artists, and just I'll keep for their privacy's sake. I've had a few artists that have told me that they want to do interviews. Like, Elsie, I love what you do. I've even reached out to some artists that I've noticed that we follow each other. I'm like, please, I'd love to do an interview. And they're like, I'm down. They give me a member of their team to reach out to, and the team member is like, nah.
Yeah. Management is the biggest blocker sometimes.
I'm telling you, if I had $1 for every time that's happened to me, I would be accumulating. I could buy myself lunch. You know? It's happened to me so many times. Very recently, it's like the artist is like, "Let's do it," and then the team is like,
Yeah.
So, and I know even with the ScHoolboy Q interview, even after everything, I know how much it required behind the scenes. Like it seems like wow, magic up front, but behind the scenes, I was in mental turmoil trying to make this happen because I don't live in LA. So it was like I had to get there. I had to get my team there to film it. And I want to make sure it was good. And it was so much like logistics to just make the stars align. Because sometimes the artist believes in you, but the team doesn't see the use of making that happen. So like I said, I was very lucky that the stars just fell in place. I was very, very lucky in that aspect because it's really hard to get that lucky in this industry. Artists are very gate kept. Like I've been to, especially I covered festivals this summer, and they'd be like, oh, you can interview this artist on festival, quick interview, and then you get there and it's like, nah, not anymore. Like I remember there's a very popular female artist. I was standing in front of her trailer. I was told that I would be able to interview her. I was ready, me and my friend that was going to help me film. We stood there. Her manager, or not really her manager, someone from her team was standing in front. I'm like, oh yeah, I've been told that I'm just standing here. When she comes out of the trailer, I want to get a few words in, just maybe 2 questions. He's like, no, that won't be happening today. I was like, I didn't let that deter me. I was like, okay, no problem. I'll just hang around. You know, maybe when she comes out. But once she comes out, he just leads her away as fast as he can. Like not even a split second. He's like, oh yeah, let's go. You know, so even when I'd been told that just ask her. She's such a nice artist. You know, she would take 3 questions from you. So yeah, it's just you in this industry, you lose more times than you win.
Yeah, for sure. But I kind of want to go. Sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I want to kind of get more into like the thick of it in terms of the ScHoolboy Q interview. Again, this is probably your biggest like kind of gig to date, right? And I was watching it, and again, I watched the whole thing, and I was going through the comments, and then there was a couple of things that I want to get your opinion about. You kind of spoke about a little bit here, right? And it's not to say all of them were false, but I understand, right? If I'm meeting someone, like, this is one of the best West Coast rappers of all time, right? Like, all time, legit, right? And if I'm there as someone who's independent and I'm able to interview him for a whole fucking hour, I'm going to be nervous, right? I might just add in some filler words and stuff like that. But then, a lot of people were kind of criticizing, like, oh, like, why is she cutting in? Or why she keep repeating
why is she having filler,
and stuff like that.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So how do you feel about this criticism?
Like, what I'm going to say about this is the night before the ScHoolboy Q interview, I was preparing. I had a team of 3 people apart from myself. So we were 4. And then, actually, I had a team of 6 people. Well, I was with 3 people the night before. And I was running through my questions. I wrote down so many questions and I was trying to rehearse and everything. And one of them told me something that I would never forget. He was just like, focus less on the questions you have to ask ScHoolboy Q and just focus on being present. Like, this is an once in a lifetime opportunity. You're sitting down. You have his entire attention and the thing about ScHoolboy Q is that he, like, his team and everything, his manager, nicest guy ever. They didn't give me a time. Like, some teams would be like, you have only 30 minutes. There was no time frame. So like, he was just like, focus on being present. Because a lot of times you could just see that some people just, they even cut the artist up. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question. So meeting him, I was so engulfed. Like, I was just like, I just want to be present here. And like, to me, when I watched that interview, it doesn't even feel like an interview. It just felt like a conversation. Some of the questions I asked him, I didn't even have them written down, but he'd say something and I'd want to know more about what he said. And that's really what it was. And I feel like a lot of people, the truth of the matter, and this is very, after I interviewed Jordan Ward last year, one of my friends that runs a big R&B page, I think on YouTube, on Instagram, he runs this page called Yams. Yams the playlist, really nice page. Go follow him. But he helped me repost my interview clips from Jordan, and people were in the comments like, so Jordan was telling me that Four was his favorite Beyonce album. We were talking, like, one thing about Jordan Ward, probably the most down to earth artist I've ever met. So we're just vibing and having fun. And someone was like, oh, this interviewer needs to learn. Like, she needs to learn. Like, how can you say this and that? And like, the comments were so negative. Like, you'd be wondering, like, sometimes, just off topic, people on social media, like, just sometimes just look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, is it even worth, like, why am I having this strong of a reaction to something so harmless?
Right.
You know, some people can be, because like in my entire life, I'm gonna be honest, like, I've seen some content and being like, this crap, but nothing on earth is gonna make me start typing. Like, 100%. You're so trash. Yeah. You're so horrible. You're like, it takes a different level of bitterness to actually like type really, really vile things out. And I was reading the comments and I was like tempted. I was replying to someone's comments and Jordan Ward DMs me. And he's like, Elsie, you had this interview with me. You killed this interview. I enjoyed the interview. Don't even bother about these people who are outside the room. Like, they're hating from outside the club. They cannot even get in. And the bigger he said this to me in November last year. He said, the bigger you get, the more these people are gonna become. Like, the more they're gonna feel that they could talk about you. But don't forget that these people are hating from outside the club. They cannot get in. And that's a mentality that I have imbibed. When I saw all the comments, like, next time when you're talking, say not ah, or say this, not that. I'm like, sometimes it's constructive criticism, but sometimes it's not. And like, sometimes you could read the comments and be like, you know what, I could change this. But some people just want to be vile. Yeah. Some people are jealous. Some people just want to bring you down. And for me, I looked at some of those comments and I was like, cool. But I was the one that got to sit with ScHoolboy Q. Yeah. I was the one that got to meet him. I was the one that got to pick his brain for an hour and have a great, fulfilling conversation. I was the one that got him to open up and talk about his art and talk about his music. It was me. So whatever, and everyone could tell, like, ScHoolboy Q himself liked the interview. He loved my work. Like, that was very clear. So a lot of people, they see those opportunities and people forget that everyone is learning. Like, the people that are the greatest interviewers today, go watch what they were doing 5 years ago. No one is ever an expert. You learn. So like, one thing about being a content creator, and I always tell people, you have to have thick skin and you have to be able to fail in front of everyone. If you can't fail in front of everyone, then this job is not for you. And so me, sometimes when I make a mistake, when I don't do things as I should or could be in the best way, people forget that when you're in the moment, when you're in the midst of what's happening, it's so difficult to be thinking about the millions of things that are going on. Like, should I say this? Should I say that? Like, in your everyday conversations with people, do you think about all of that? You don't. Yeah. But I feel like people put unrealistic expectations on content creators. Point blank period. I do not care. Yeah. Like, when comments become too much, I turn them off, because to be honest, like, too much praise is not good. Yeah. Too much critique is not good either way. Sure. So
yeah. I think sometimes people, it's not necessarily even that they fully even stand by their negative opinion. I think sometimes when they do see people who are a bit more, I guess on the more local scale, they feel like, oh, if I actually type something, they're gonna see it, and if they see it, they're gonna reply and stuff like that. And I think the moment they know, oh, she's the type of person who's gonna reply, who's gonna see it, then some people will just shoot their shot to be like, oh, I just want to respond. It's really weird, but it does happen when somebody, I just want a response from the person with the verified
TikTok. It's not even really weird. Like you would see even on the internet, like some people would type something vile and the celebrity will see it and they'd be like, oh, I didn't really mean it. Like maybe
exactly, it happens all the time.
They'd be like, oh, it's all love anyway.
Yeah, oh, I was just trolling or something like that. It's so silly.
Just trolling this and that. Like people actually forget. And that's why honestly, like even today, I would see some tweets and I just be like, you just want my attention and I'm not gonna give it to you. Like you're gonna stay there because the moment I give you attention, like people on the internet are like weirdos. I'm so sorry. There are just so many weirdos on the internet. And like some of them are gonna wear the fact that you blocked them as a badge of honor. Like I got blocked by Elsie, not Elise. So sometimes I'll leave you to keep doing your trash. Like, I wouldn't even block you. Like, be there. Just know that you're screaming into the void. Like, you're screaming into the void. Because even when I block you, so people, that's the attention that you're craving. Whoa, she saw my tweet. It provoked enough of an emotional reaction in her for her to block me. Like, people are very not normal. You know, on the internet. So, like, I always have to keep that in mind, really, you know, when dealing with all of that.
Of course. Let's shift gears a little bit. We'll move from interviews for now. We'll talk about, again, we'll go back to kind of general hip-hop and R&B. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on the viewpoint of it. Again, because I feel like you do have a love-and-hate relationship with social media. And again, of course, with the opinions of R&B and stuff like that, I completely get it, right? So I think it was last year where you said, can we just go back to liking albums without saying, oh, this is better than this or something like that, or something like, or this is better than this unrelated album, stuff like that. But I think for a lot of people, especially with hip-hop, and people I've interviewed, they say, oh no, hip-hop is competitive. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy it. It's one of the few genres that do have that. Is that an opinion you share, or do you feel like, oh no, you know what, it's just like any other genre, you know, you can't really pit two albums together? What are your thoughts?
I think there's two sides to that. Like, there is the fact that a lot of albums, you could directly kind of trace a lineage of like influence. Like, you listen to an album today, you could be like, this person drew influence from Illmatic, or this person drew influence from The Blueprint, you know. I think that's cool. But a lot of times, like, sometimes we don't let, especially new artists, hip-hop and R&B alike, we don't let new artists be new artists. We don't let them come into their own and discover their growth. An artist comes out with an album, and the first thing we do is, this sounds like this other album. You know, this sounds like this other thing. And because of that, the album that this new work piece of art is being compared to already has people that feel strongly about this album, either positive or negative. And the moment that you attach a new body of work to that album that people already have preconceived opinions about, you've just set the person up for failure. That is just the truth. Like, people are just going to be like, some people are like, oh, no way, it's not as good as this. Like, or, oh, it's way better than that. Like, and it's just like, sometimes just let the artist be, especially when it's a new artist. I always feel bad when it's a new artist. When it's older artists, you can always be like, oh, okay, established artists rather. But like newer artists, like, it's really tough sometimes because they just want to be their own person. I asked Khamaari this question because every time Khamaari would make something, everybody would be like, oh, Frank Ocean rebirthed, you know, Frank Ocean is back. This is Frank Ocean. And I would always see those comments and I'm like, y'all are putting pressure on this guy. Like, Frank Ocean is like one of the greatest artists of all time. Like, those are very big shoes to fill. This is his debut album as an artist. And I asked him that, and like, he had a very similar thought process. He's like, people are going to say that, and I respect Frank. I love Frank, and I look up to him, but I'm my own artist. I'm my own experiences. And I feel a lot of times people do that, and then the artists themselves, and they enter into a cycle of comparison, or in another crazy way, they pit these artists against each other. And artists that are not even on the same level, like hierarchy. This is one starting out. This person has already been established. Why are we pitting them against each other? I just feel like it doesn't help music conversations. There's no harm to be like, okay, it reminds me of this album. You know, I don't think there's harm in that, but I feel like the language that we use in those conversations really matters. You know, this is way better than that, or this is a better version of that. You know, sometimes it could just do more hurt than more harm than good, really.
Yeah, sure. And I think especially with the kind of new versus experienced artists, I feel like for me, I always feel like rappers could fit into weight classes. We're going to continue the sport analogy, right? So when Jid first started out, for example, and everyone's like, oh, he just kind of sounds like Kendrick. It's like, yeah, well, yes. Kendrick is one of the most prominent rappers of the last decade. But
Thank you, right?
You know what I mean? Like, so it makes sense. I think this idea that artists are going to come in and not have, I think it's perpetuated by artists themselves. So I don't feel sorry for them. I remember there was that Lauryn Hill interview in the 90s where she's like, I don't really listen to music. It's like bullshit, man. Come on, everyone listens to music, but whatever. But then now artists think it's cool to be like, no, I'm not really influenced. I just kind of just take it, I just go how I feel. It's like, no, like the reason why you're a rapper is because there's other rappers, right? And the reason that those rappers exist is because there's other rappers, right? And it's absolutely fine. I think if you're talking about someone who's like 6-7 years into their career and they do sound like everyone else, there are a few examples if you think hard enough, then yeah, but we can talk about that, right? But I think with artists who are just starting out, even Kendrick Lamar himself, you go back to like C4 and stuff like that, he sounds like Lil Wayne, right? And that's one of his least.
You can hear some songs where he pulls some inspiration from Eminem. You can hear some song where he pulls some inspiration from Nas. Like you could hear it in the music.
Exactly.
You know, but if you compared early Kendrick back then to Lil Wayne, like what's even the point?
Exactly, and even if it's true, it's kind of like, well, again, you can compare other new artists, but like, oh, this is the best new artist. I think it's absolutely a fun conversation to have. Or you're talking about two tenured artists like a Jay-Z and Nas. I think that's also fine. But again, when people, I think this weird idea that like influence is like a bad thing is so crazy to me. I've never understood that.
It's crazy. Yeah, a lot of them don't even say influence. They say flat out steal.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Like, can we actually relax with the kind of language that we use? Like, and this is just a whole other thing of music fans not understanding sampling and interpolation. Like, that's just another whole conversation. Like, too. Oh, they stole. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean,
what are you talking about?
So, speaking of like, again, kind of speaking to the fans, again, one thing that I spoke to another person, a lady called Ray, right? And she says that it's very hard to kind of get people interested in good music because either A, there's so much out there, or because someone doesn't have so much hype behind them, even if they've heard of this person before, it's like, oh, like, I haven't heard that in the club, or I haven't heard my favorite, like, content creator. I haven't heard Fantana talk about it, so I'm going to dismiss it. I do think we're in a world where there's a lot of music out there. I think there always has been, but again, with social media and with Spotify, it's like, it's really in front of you, right? So, how do you manage this as someone who creates content? How do you manage this kind of volume of content coming out? It does feel like sometimes when your tweets, you do express that kind of tiredness to be like, oh, you know, I'm too tired to keep up. Like, it is a lot. So how do you kind of manage that?
It is a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it feels overwhelming a lot of times when you feel like you have to be on top of every release in some type of way. I currently don't even have a formula to manage. Like I try, like I try because I try to keep my ears to the ground. That's why I'm always asking people on Twitter, like, what are you listening to? Like, what's in your rotation right now? What's an artist that you're inspired by right now? Because just asking those questions will kind of keep me in the loop.
For sure, yeah.
Really, because social media moves so fast these days that I was off Twitter for a week, and I'm telling you, like because like I opened TikTok and I was seeing people like commenting on like Obama and like, why is everyone talking about Obama? And then I just log into Twitter for a second and I see that he brought out like the summer playlist thing, and like you miss one day of Twitter and it's like you missed a year basically. So with new music, I just try to keep my ears to the ground. I try to ask. It's crowdsourcing. Really, it's just a matter of crowdsourcing, like just seeing what everyone is listening to. But the truth of the matter is this: a lot of people don't know what they like. A lot of people, more than they like to admit, are group thinkers. Once they see an artist is finally popping, they want to be like, oh, I was at day one, you know, but they never talked about that artist till the artist started blowing up. And we've seen that happen so many times. And honestly, I'm not even an artist, but I've seen that happen to me. You know, I've seen that happen to me. Like people are like, oh, like Elsie, I have been supporting you since like day zero. I'm fine. Like, I don't think I've ever seen you before. Like, I don't think I've ever engaged with your tweet, but thank you for the support anyways. But once people start seeing, like, I noticed that a lot of people that told me I wasn't relevant, once they saw the interview with ScHoolboy Q, and these are small artists, you're like, so can we schedule? I'm like, wait, what changed? A month ago, I wasn't relevant. Now I'm relevant. Like, what changed, you know? And that's the thing. People, it's just the sad reality of life. Like, people will hop on the wave when they see that you have traction. It's just, that's why people fake monthly listeners. That's why people do all that. That's why people fake YouTube views and fake the streams, because they want to create the illusion that people are already tuned in. Even though getting into it, monthly listeners is a fake. It could be.
It's a very like so fudged up number. It counts features as well. It's kind of crazy
to manipulate. It's so easy. I have playlists on Spotify that have tens of thousands of saves, and I would really have people that would reach out to me and be like, I should put a song that has nothing to do with the playlist. Like, maybe the playlist is old school hip hop now. They tell me to put a song that has nothing to do with the theme in the first 5 songs on the playlists. And because people are going to play the playlist anyway, and it just gives streams. And that's really people. That's why I don't care about monthly listeners anymore. Because like the main measure of relevance, can you go on tour? Can you sell out a room of 50 people? A lot of people have the following online, but they cannot sell out a room of 50 people. Who are we deceiving here? Like, so to me, that's really the real measure. Like, I remember going to Tizo Touchdown show in Toronto this year. And I was blown away. There were over 3,000 people in that room, packed. Everyone singing his songs, both the big ones, both the underground ones, word for word. So like, people saying, who knows you? How many monthly listeners does he have? Fuck all that. Because like, this guy has 3,000 people in a city that he's not even from. He said it was his first time having a show in Toronto. These people bought used their hard-earned money to buy tickets. They're here singing your song word for word. That is what matters. Not how many retweets you get on social media. Not how many people liked your video. Not any of that. I just wish artists, especially newer artists, stop getting caught up in the vanity metrics. Right. You know, just getting caught up in those vanity metrics it's not helpful.
And I want to link that to my next question, but because you said about the numbers being fudged and stuff like that, which is completely true. Because this is something I used to look at as well. I'd be like, oh my gosh, this artist only has like 500,000. Like, especially with the little, because I'm trying to find the little people. But again, when you realize, oh, they have like this one song they're featuring that blows up, it adds to their monthly listens. Like, wait, no, that has nothing to do with you. You're just a feature. Exactly. Has something to do with you, but you're a feature, right? Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
you're not the main event.
Exactly. So it's weird. Or one song blows off TikTok. It's like people aren't even listening to your song; they're just using it as background for their music. And I think there's sad cases like this, like Steve Lacy and stuff like that. And yeah, you might sell out a tour because you're still Steve Lacy at the end of the day. But when it comes to the other songs in your catalog, like I think the next question to follow on from you is can they sell out a tour? Yes, but can everyone even know the songs? Because it must be so shit for an artist, right? Like they blow up for whatever reason, right? And then they get to the show and they have like 20 songs they're going through and people only know like 2. That has to be a really shit experience for anyone, right? I think that's something that happens a lot, or happens more often than it should do.
I also feel like a big reason for that is not really the artist, but the ticket culture, the resale culture. When an artist gets big on social media, it's like, and to me, that's a blessing and a curse. Because like, when an artist gets big on social media, that's why a lot of artists, you ask them their dream, like their dream trajectory, and they tell you that I want my song to blow up, on social media. Be careful what you wish for. That's just all I'm going to say. Honestly. Be careful what you wish for, because now a song blowing up on social media doesn't really have anything to do with its quality. They're great songs. In fact, I would argue that nowadays, for any song to have any sort of like prolonged relevance, even down to the beef, Kendrick and Drake, 2 of the biggest artists in hip hop, they've had longevity, but social media played a huge part in those songs getting heard. I mean, links were posted just on Twitter, so we can't deny the fact that the part that social media really plays in all of this. But be careful what you wish for as a new artist, because if you don't have a core fan base already and you blow up, people are gonna just form a narrative for you. And I feel like that's what Tommy Richmond is suffering from
Oh
right
yes, I saw that the other day.
Because like I'm really tapped in, and I have been listening to him for years now. Like I have been listening to his music for years now. I heard Million Dollar Baby and I was like, oh my God. When I saw the reception of the first snippet he posted, I sent it to one of my friends. I'm like, this might be Tommy's big break. Like, I'm so excited for him. He was featured on Brent's album last year, like the one that dropped in November.
Yeah.
He's been there. He didn't drop from the sky. Like, I've been listening to Tommy since early 2022. Before I even started my TikTok, I knew of Tommy Richmond, you know? So, but people nowadays are like, industry plan, he dropped from the sky, this and that. And because of that, like, they almost create a whole narrative. And those people, some people buy tickets because you're hot and trendy, resell it to people. The real fans are priced out. And it's even worse when you don't see. Lacey was even lucky. Like, he already had a core fan base before that. But when you don't have that core fan base, people are just gonna call you TikTok artist, this artist. But I feel like that's so unfair, really, because like I just feel it's so unfair, and I that's why, like, hate me, love me, like I'm gonna really like try to defend artists that I know I've seen put in the work and have gotten a big break on social media. I feel like it's not something that we should look down on them for, because people that are saying, oh, social media, let me tell you how hard it is to get a social media hit. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And this song wasn't just big on TikTok. It topped the Billboard Hot 100. Like, if you think that's easy, why isn't everyone doing it? If it was that easy to achieve, why isn't everyone doing it? You know, so I feel like music listeners just talk too much. Sometimes just shut up. If you don't know what to say, you can close your mouth. It's all right. It's okay. The world would be better off, you know? So that's really my opinion on that.
And again, so with that being said, so we have these fans that don't know what they talk about. You got these monthly listeners that don't mean anything. And you said about, and I think it was like late December of like 2022, you're like, hip hop is truly dying, right? Obviously, that was a while ago. I wanna know how you feel about it today. You did say that. So I want to know how you feel now. Like, how do you feel about the current state of hip hop? Do you feel like it's in a good position, or do you feel like, oh, actually, it's time for a change of heart? It's time for a shift.
It's time for a shift. Definitely it's time for a shift. I don't think it's in a terrible state, but it is time for a shift. Gimmicks, the gimmicks are getting too much. Like, and it's hurting because those gimmicks aren't even coming from the new artists. They're coming from the established artists. Like, the gimmicks, I just wish we would stop with the gimmicks. Like, the artists that have the talent and are making quality music, anyone that tells you like, oh, there's no good music in hip hop, shut up. There's good music that's coming out. There is a lot of good music, but that good music is just so saturated that there's one of my my mutuals on Twitter. His name is Elliot. Elliot, is that his name? Ellis. His name is Ellis. Right. And there's a tweet that he made, and he said that the cream isn't just rising to the top anymore. It's not that there's bad music. It's not that there's no one making good music. It's just that the cream isn't rising to the top anymore. And I feel like that's just the case. Like, everyone is complaining about how hip hop is this, but I feel like the shift that's needed is for that cream to rise to the top again. That's what is really needed, because the gimmicks are getting too much. Even the established artists aren't really putting work. That's why when I went and criticized Drake's For All the Dogs, people wanted to cut my neck off. But it needed to be said. Like, if you're an artist as big as Drake, you need to set a good example, you know, show people that it's not, you don't need to do gimmicks to make good music. It's about the quality of the work you put out, not how memeable it is or how trendy it is, or if it's going to be a TikTok sound. You know, you could tell when artists write music to be there's some like, I love Bad Habits so much because it's such a well-written song. It just happened to be big on TikTok, but it's such a well-written song, from the chord progression to the bridge to everything. But there's some songs you just know when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, it was made for TikTok. Thank you so much for this, you know? And usually those songs don't even, they might blow up for 3 days, but there's no longevity.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think this aligns to the current conversation I always hear. Even though me personally, I will go out my way to find music that I find interesting, right? But so many people give this same kind of rhetoric where it's like, oh, there's not another big three, or who's going to be the next big three of the next decade? And it's like, well, if you actually give it, I think this kind of goes inside. The cream isn't right to the top. I'm like, there's so many good artists, right? Oh, there's so many artists who are like in their absolute peak right now, like a Vince, like a Jid. I think Vince is getting these flowers now, but like a Vince or like a Jid and stuff like that. It's like, well, if it was up to me, you guys would be kind of the next face of the next decade. But for some reason, it's almost as if people kind of formed like, they became creatures of habits of the music, or maybe the kind of the fan base that was into like engaged with, maybe just too old and kind of stuck in their ways, and the younger audience are kind of just like, I want what's right now. And it feels like there's not a point where people are like putting people like, oh no, you are the best, because people don't even really say that as much anymore.
I just think, honestly, we even have to ask ourselves, do these artists even want to be part of a big three? Like, do they even want to be? Because like, I know for a fact Vince Staples isn't like,
oh no chance.
He's not
no
like
chance.
sitting in his house being like, I need to be in the big three. I need to be in the big three. I asked Denzel Curry a question and his reaction was so strong to it. I was like, do you ever feel underrated? And he's like, he is tired of people asking him that question, because he's like, he doesn't care. Like his music, hate his music. The people that love him. And he's had longevity because of that.
Yep.
And same thing with like ScHoolboy Q. He was like, I don't live underrated. I live pretty good. Like, like he lives a good life. He wakes up in the morning. He has a big ass house, and like some artists just want to make good art and be appreciated. Some of them don't want to be the big three. Like, and I think sometimes we as listeners, we have to kind of just also ask ourselves, like, some artists, there's something that ScHoolboy Q said that always I keep going back to, like, some artists are so big, they have to box themselves in. Like, they're so big that like they can't even try anything different because the audience is like, huh? Like, go back to the old. That's how you hear I miss the old this, I miss the old this, I miss the old that, because they become so big, their fan base isn't even letting them move on, So I guess some artists don't just want to be the big three or anything. I mean,
yeah, taking it to across the Atlantic, right? Because one thing that's very surprising about you, because it doesn't really happen a lot with like North Americans or Americans in general, right? People don't really give a fuck about UK rap, like, it's quite memed in the Americas, right? So it's like they'll kind of go for the biggest artist and go, oh, he's cool. I don't think people put any real kind of stock in like UK rappers seriously, rappers. Yeah, like seriously trying to be like the best in their field. And I think there's a lot of people doing good work, right? But I've seen you tweet about, like, again, in the R&B as well, like, the Deals of the world. I think he even said like Lil Sims got signed, or Lil Sims album was better than Call Me If You Get Lost. And I was like, wow, so I've met another person who shares the same opinion, right? So again, so where does love for UK rap or R&B UK come from? I know Toronto is very similar to London and kind of it's like influence and stuff like that. So yeah, talk more on that.
But yes, apart from Toronto, I did spend a huge chunk of my life in Nigeria. Okay, and there's a very big connection between Nigeria and the UK. And when I was in high school, that's all people would listen to. Like the Skepta. I remember when Skepta dropped Konnichiwa. It was like it was what everyone was listening to back then. And you hear artists like J Hus, drop too. And I don't know, I'm gonna be honest, and people might hate me for this, but like Americans have main characters syndrome.
Yes, they do. They really do.
Americans think the world revolves around like America, and it doesn't. It doesn't. I feel like there's so many beautiful albums that have come out from the UK, and so many artists. Like, I've loved what Dave did with Psychodrama. I adore Skepta's Ignorance is Bliss. That's one of my favorite albums of all time. Oh, okay. And then you mentioned like Little Sims as well, and there's just been a lot of like there that have really like captivated me, both on the rap and the R&B side of things. And that's why I told myself, like, as a content creator, and I think that's kind of what sets me apart. I'm like, I would talk about UK music. I would talk about Afro beats. I would talk about anything I listen to. Like, I'm not a like people are there's a conversation going around whenever, and I don't like it. I'm sorry, I have to say I don't like when people are like, Elsie, you're one of my favorite hip-hop content creators. I'm like, I'm not a hip-hop creator, please. Like, I love hip-hop. Hip-hop is probably my favorite genre, but like I like other things too. Like that's another box and I don't want to be put in too. So I've made sure I'll talk about everything. And honestly, it's brought so much opportunities for me. Like a lot of people, what they always tell me is like, the reason why I stopped on your page is because like you talk about so much variety. You could talk about Thames today, you talk about Skepta tomorrow, you could talk about Kendrick Lamar, like all in the same sentence. And I just feel like that duality is so important because there's so much good music. To be honest, the UK, like right now, I feel like the R&B coming out of the UK is better than whatever is going on this side of the world. Like,
Agreed.
I don't know what's in the water. There's something in the water, but the R&B in the UK right now is crazy.
Do you have any favorites as of current?
Of course. Cleo Soul.
Yes.
You mentioned Odile, who's kind of mixing the R&B with that. Mahalia.
Yeah.
We also have this other artist, how to sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, Emelia too.
Manelia. Yeah.
God, I hope I didn't pronounce that wrongly. But she's pretty good. The girl group, the R&B girl group,
Flow. Yeah.
They're doing a lot of like great things. I mean, Georgia Smith had some really, really nice. I loved Lost and Found, one of my favorite albums ever. Man, all the top of my head, it's even hard. Like even if you want to go into the big names, like the Adeles of the world, like there's a lot of great like music that's just come out. Honestly, I even feel like even my favorite, like the band Jungle, they're British. And I adored your music. And honestly, I know right now there's some names off the top of my head that I'm even forgetting, but there's just something really special. There's this guy, I forget his name now. Elmine, really, really good. I don't know if it's Elmine or Elmine. Sometimes I'm just bad at names, but he's so good. Like there's a lot of great music coming out of the UK, and I feel like it's a disservice to people to ignore that. It's just a disservice to good music. Yeah.
So kind of getting to the final bit of like our discussions, right? So more recently, you've been able to land your own show with Revolt called Off the Record, right? And it's a few episodes in. And I remember kind of listening to how this happened. They just reached out by email and they kind of gave you a lot of creative control on how it's done, which at the time when I was listening, it kind of seemed like you took that as like both a positive and negative, where it's like, okay, I get to do what I want, but it would be good to know what you guys want from me in that sense.
I'm gonna be honest, like there's no such thing as full creative control if you're working for a company. It's been a rude awakening. It has been a rude awakening for me. And it's something I've struggled with. And it's the reason why I'm so big on having my own platform, my own thing. Because I had to show with Revolt didn't mean I'm gonna stop posting on YouTube. I'm gonna stop posting on TikTok, because there's no such thing as full creative control. It's don't even deceive yourself. There is no such thing once you're working for a company. But one thing I appreciate, and which makes Revolt very unique, and one thing I don't want to give out too much, but the show, there's a lot of exciting things coming out we are working on, and it's completely out of the format that we have already done. We went back to the drawing board and I was like, I think we could better this. And we're currently in the revamp process. But one thing I appreciate about Revolt above any company I've ever worked with, Spotify, when they reached out to me, they already knew what they wanted me to talk about. They were like, just genre spotlight. I'm like, okay, cool. Can I come up with the genres? No. These are the genres we want you to spotlight. But Revolt came to me and you're like, we love what you do. We believe in you. And I've never had a company believe in me the way Revolt has believed in me. Even when I've not agreed with them and being like, can we just go back to the drawing board for this? Can we tweak this? They have been very receptive and very open. And I just appreciate that. I appreciate that so much. I consider myself lucky. They reached out to me out of the blue. On the first call with them, I didn't even know that's what it was going to be. Just like, oh, we're considering a show and everything. I'm like, okay, whatever. If anything comes out of it, I don't know. But when we started working towards the show, I started noticing that it was serious. Like they sent me a camera. They sent me,
Oh wow,
they
okay.
sent me mics. They brought a technician. I'm like, okay. like, I didn't really expect that because no company really ever cares. It's just like film the videos the way you normally film your videos. But
Right, yeah.
they were even concerned with like the decor in my house and everything. And honestly, it's been amazing to work with them and to just have a team and for people to believe in you in the industry like that. And something I really appreciate and I don't take for granted at all.
Yeah, and how is it different now working in a team? Like, I think at the time where you were on Sound Century, you said, "Oh, you just had like one. It was just you for a bit, and then someone joined." But then, how's it now different? Because again, you've done a lot of this journey yourself, and now someone else is kind of feeding the ideas into your process. How do you manage that?
It's a bit it has its ups and downs because I love to work solitary. I love to come up with an idea solitary, and then I decide at what point. Usually, when the process is over, I bring people in and be like, "Okay, can I get a second thought on this before it goes out?"
Right. Yeah.
But I started learning how to actually. I have to share every step of the way. Like when I come up with a video idea, I have to share it. When I write the script for the video, I have to share it. So it's teaching me how to collaborate because I'm not a very great collaborator. I'm not big on teamwork. I was the type of person when the teacher would be like, "Yeah, get into teams of 3," it would piss me off. I did not like working in teams.
Same.
I'm not big on teamwork, but this has really taught me like working with Revolt and just seeing how big shows are produced and how the industry goes that if you actually want to go far, if you actually want to turn, you can start off by yourself, but there's so much more that can be achieved when you work with other people. And that's what it's been teaching me. So it's gotten me out of my comfort zone, but I like the fact that it's gotten me out of my comfort zone.
Cool. And again, looping back to Sound Interview one more time. One thing you said was super interesting. You said superstars are made, right? Because some people feel like, oh, superstars are born or made, and you're like, no, superstars are made. Like, I think again, like you're saying, in terms of like the team behind them, and there's a lot of intention. I want to kind of flip that on its head and ask you, like, do you feel like people who are like so passionate about music and like their genres, do you think those people are born like you're just born that way? I just love music and it is what it is, or do you feel like that's also made? Do you feel like there has to be an intentional effort behind that?
I don't feel like it's born. I feel like it's made through your circumstances, through your environment. I wouldn't have loved music as much as I did. I mean, of course, there's the raw material, but like I was immersed into music at such a young age. I was only 7 when my dad was like, "All right, piano lessons, go get it done." My dad was also big on music. There's always music playing in the house. Like my mom too, and like being in high school, loving music and just being surrounded by music all the time. Music was just such a huge culture, and I feel like that's what helped.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't think you're inherently, I feel like the earlier the better, but I feel like you could teach yourself anything. Like I feel like you could teach yourself anything. I feel like the pandemic really helped me when it came to music
Right.
because I was doing nothing for months. All I did was listen to music, watch video essays on YouTube. I learned so much about music in the pandemic that I still apply today. So nothing is born. I don't believe anyone is born with an. Sometimes, okay, some people are born with good voices. It's just the truth. Like some people are born with like a natural talent, but talent is never enough to get you wherever you want to go. The people that are at the top, like barely anyone got there just through being talented alone. Because if it's talent, so many people have talent. Like you're not the only one. Millions of people have talent. So that's just not enough, in my opinion. It's work ethic. It's the team, the people behind you, is the decisions you make along the way. Like nothing is ever born, in my opinion. Like yeah.
Yeah. What is next for Elsie looking forward?
Oh my God. That question always gives me like nerves. I don't know, but I could say for the next few months, I'm going back to the drawing board. My content has changed since I started, but I want to go back to what it's very easy when you're in this position and it'll in a way it almost feels like you just have to go with the flow because my career is just moving in many different directions, and I feel like this year I've just been caught in the current, and I just want to slow things down. My objective for the next few months is I have a couple interviews that I'm sitting on. Not a couple, I have 8 interviews that I'm sitting on. I have to roll them out this next few weeks. But after doing all that, rolling all that out, back to the drawing board. I want to go back to creating the kind of content I fell in love with, the kind of content that you would see on Elsie's page in 2022. I want to go back this current version of me and do that again. That's really what I want to do next. I just feel like sometimes it's easy to lose your why. Like, why did I even start this in the first place? You just get caught up in the metrics and the followers and the results and everything. And I want to go back to my why. I want to go back and create content and be like, this is why I started doing this again. Because I felt like I've lost myself in many ways. Just being so results focused, but I want to go back and just enjoy the process. That's really what's next for me here. And if great things happen while that's happening, I mean, all fine and good, but that's really my objective.
It's fair. I'm gonna throw you a final kind of like fun question. It'll be a fun question just to kind of close this out, right? So when you interviewed Raven and I think you gave her a question of like a treasure island of 3 vinyls, right? I'm gonna throw this back to you. A fun fact, one of the ways I actually kind of found your work, this was years ago. I think this must have been like maybe 2022, maybe 2021, where I think you were like, and a friend sent this to me. It was when you were kind of going through your vinyls or something like that.
That's 2022, yeah.
Yeah. And it's always like, oh, because again, at the time when I had my podcast, someone's like, oh, because my podcast was literally called The Vinyl Collective, right? And someone's like, oh, you should do this too. And it's only until I was doing my research, I was like, oh shit, that was the same person. So I know you have favorite albums, so I'm gonna make this a bit harder for you. I know you like your late registrations because the internet. I think that Roy Wood's album and stuff like that. Cool. We'll take that out of the equation. Those don't exist anymore. What are Elsie's 3 Treasure Island vinyls?
Damn. Like that I actually have in my collection? Or
either or. Like you want a Treasure Island, you need them.
Wow, this is tough. Three albums I would take. 3 albums on vinyl I would take. Oof. Whenever people ask me this question, I always blank. I don't know why.
So good. It could be how you're feeling today, right?
Right now, how am I feeling today? I'm gonna take Mariah Carey's Butterfly. I love that album so much. I feel like it's a pop and R&B songwriting Bible. I feel like anyone that really, especially any female artist that really wants to get into the world, like that is it. I would say I would take an album I've been listening to a lot, which is Gold by Cleo Soul.
Right? Yeah.
It's just been at the forefront of my mind. And you know what? Let's make it an all-female pick today. I think I will go with see, my Spotify is playing. I think I would go with one of my favorite albums of all time, and that's Anti by Rihanna. Okay. I gave the album a release in last week, and that album is too good. So yeah, cool. Those are my 3. Yeah.
Not a bad choice. Yeah. So at the end of this interview, Elsie, do you have any final messages? Do you have anyone you would like to shout or say hello to?
I'm blanking, but I just want to say thank you to everyone that engages with my content in any way possible. I really do. Sometimes it's like when I meet people in real life and they're like, I watch your content, so it's still surreal sometimes. I'm like, y'all can't be serious. But I appreciate it, and I want to say thank you to you for having me and for just being patient, man. It's been a crazy last few weeks. I've been in like 3 different countries, just traveling. It's just been hard to get a hold of things. So I thank you for your patience, and I actually really had a lot of fun today with this conversation. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone that engages with my content. Like, you will not be disappointed. That's all I have to say. Like, stick with me, and like in 5 years you'd be like, yeah, you know, I had some sense for sticking with Elsie. So yeah, that's pretty much it.